Hello and welcome. I'm Çağlayan Arkan, the Vice President and the Global Lead for Manufacturing and Supply Chain at Microsoft, and this is the Art of Possible. Today, we're talking about the importance of digital transformation at scale. We know that the disruptions caused from the pandemic and other world events have accelerated the need for innovation across all aspects of manufacturing operations. Manufacturers have responded, and it's exciting to see how transformation is moving rather quickly. Yet one issue remains. Many manufacturers are still in pilot purgatory without plans or a sense of urgency to scale. For many years now, PTC and Microsoft have worked with thousands of companies to help them align business, organizational, and technology priorities in order to capture new value at scale. Today, we will share our learnings and advice for manufacturers. With me here today is Howard Heppelmann, Divisional Vice President and General Manager of ThingWorx IoT Solutions at PTC, and my good friend. Howard, welcome. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Çağlayan. I'm really happy to be here, and this is a very important topic. One can hardly open an analyst report that on one hand doesn't express how critical digital transformation is, and yet on the other side reflects sort of a less inspiring story because many companies aren't getting the impact and scale that they set out to get. And I feel very at home with you and with Microsoft here today, because as you well know, this has been at the heart of the collaboration work that we've been doing, and I'm really excited to join you in this conversation.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, Howard. It's not only important, but it's an exciting one as you're sharing my excitement and energy. So in fact, last year, I believe it was, PTC made a big announcement about your company's overall transition to a cloud-first, software-as-a-service unified approach. So what were you seeing in the market that prompted PTC to accelerate this strategy?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Çağlayan. And yes, we did announce back in October a fairly significant reorganization. Quite frankly, it was to go after exactly the opportunity that we're talking about today. So one might say, well, how does SaaS pertain to this conversation? But really at the center of a SaaS strategy is things like standard high-value use cases, accelerating the customer's time to value for those use cases, being able to deploy on a repeatable and scalable architecture, enabling an environment for us, for you, and most importantly, for our joint customers, where it's an evergreen innovation environment. We're able to continue to innovate and put those new capabilities in the hands of our customers so that they can put them to work in their operations.
Yeah, Howard, I agree wholeheartedly. And when we look around the industry as a whole, the recent disruption, of course, was a huge setback for everyone, and especially for a conservative industry like manufacturing with very, very long cycles with little to no compelling reason to accelerate digital transformation. And it was a major, major tipping point, I believe. So what is PTC hearing, Howard, in terms of how these dynamics continue to affect digital transformation initiatives in factories, plants? What are you hearing from your customers in terms of, do they have a sense of urgency? What do they need?
So in terms of some of the key challenges, and some of these are pandemic related, some of them, quite frankly, are not, but adjusting to fluctuating demand and supply with changing product mixes, the agility to respond quickly to what is a much more dynamic environment. All of this is complicated by the problem all of us recognize and live every day related to labor shortages and getting the right people in the right spots to do the work. So those are some of the big themes, but in terms of desires, what we see is that customers are really looking to harness digitally enabled processes that create better alignment between the demand and capacity challenges that they're dealing with. So whether their particular need is one of cost reduction, operating cost reduction, because maybe the demand has dried up momentarily, or it's more about creating more capacity to produce more revenue because there's an influx of demand or a change in the product mix. These are real issues that manufacturers are struggling with every day. And I would say another one is just the desire to accelerate the scale of their digital initiatives. The latest solution that we launched here at PTC, which is very much in line with the joint collaboration work we're doing with you and the broader Microsoft teams, is specifically designed to create a standard approach to performance management that enables manufacturers to progress through a priority-driven, digital transformation. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Howard, absolutely. And very well said. We're seeing exactly the same things in terms of what's happening in the market with our customers. There's more to digital transformation than merely adopting technology. Technology is just a tool. It's all about the leader, the leadership's vision, the ability to execute, etc., and it's all about business outcomes. So I like to advise businesses to start where it's most needed: customer systems or back-end operations or employees, business models, etc. But you gotta start with an outcome, determine what outcomes, and then you can get to where the data is as relates to that particular outcome. This will enable faster time to value, which is the whole deal here, and quicker iterations. We have to move from years of implementation to actually weeks, and this about very quick time to value from data to insights, insights to actions, actions to outcomes. And so this will only work, and I know we're in violent agreement between our two companies, is identify the right use cases, and that will make the most impact, and start with a few, connect customers, products, assets, and people as needed. You will then have the right data at the right time to remove silos, get the enterprise connected, anticipate customer needs, generate new revenue streams, partner with new partners, etc. So, Howard, now that we violently agree on the observations on what works, what is the advice from PTC to companies that are stuck with piloting and looking for efficient ways to scale?
I would say the first and foremost is really aligning on what are those high-value use cases that can be standardized across the network. If I back up a few years early in our IoT days, there were lots of good projects and use cases one could pursue, but many of them ended up being unique to a particular site. And so a lot of resource and effort was put into that. And quite frankly, for that site, they got a lot of value out of it, but it wasn't value that could be quickly scaled across a network of 100 sites. And really, for manufacturers today to get transformational outcomes, that scale element is absolutely critical. And so where we've seen it be successful is when companies take time up front to really identify and put the financial muscle into vetting those use cases, and then actually deploying those use cases, but not with the objective of experimenting with technology, with a laser focus on an intended business or financial outcome that they're seeking, and then bringing the organization in with the intention that the proof of value, not proof of concept, will be successful in having a plan already laid down for how to quickly extend that throughout the production network.
Well, I will share a couple of examples from my vantage point. I think, between our companies, we have been able to bring a number of these to life together. One of the examples that I really like is Johnson & Johnson. Alex and Satya actually announced that at the World Economic Forum, the Lighthouse Manufacturing about a year ago, We've been working with J&J on their digital manufacturing transformation. They call it next-gen manufacturing. Azure, AI, IoT, Edge, and all coming together under Microsoft Cloud for Manufacturing. We've been building capabilities and transforming their manufacturing. And last year at our Ignite conference, also they shared some of the early results of this work within their manufacturing business, including achieving zero platform downtime through cloud technologies and being able to reduce their time and cost to deploy by about 25%, which is like amazing for manufacturing. Everybody knows the margins that are in question there. We have also worked with a Swedish multinational networking and telecommunications company, everyone knows Ericsson, to help them launch the first greenfield 5G factory and in the US. And this was a perfect example of achieving scale with an agile and a modernized stack. And Ericsson have achieved about 120% productivity increase, reduced lead time by 75%, reduced inventory by 50%. The list goes on. This is also very an amazing example for me because they started before the pandemic, almost foreseeing the disruption that is to come, and then never blinked an eye throughout the pandemic, and then tremendously benefited from that investment through the pandemic, particularly at the face of it. And then and obviously they created this capability to bring those use cases into their factories 3 times faster now, again in weeks, than they were able to achieve before. So, a couple use cases or examples from PTC, Howard. What are some of the outcomes that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think when we think of use cases and those that are being adopted most aggressively by our clients, I think it's good to maybe step back for a second and talk about, in a factory or production environment, what is it that companies can do that creates a more efficient environment? And maybe this is too overly simplistic, but one is they can either make their assets perform better in the factory, all the capital that they've invested in, get a greater return on that. They can pursue use cases that make the workforce more productive or efficient. They can look at use cases that target quality improvement, either through the operators or through assets, or they can think about fundamentally the design of the process itself, right? The digital twin of the factory. By far for us, the number one use case, the overwhelmingly number one use case has been this use case that we talk about, digital performance management. Early on, we had many customers that built their own flavor of that when we offered more of a platform, but through the work that we've been doing with Microsoft and harvesting these best practices and turning them into solutions that PTC deploys on top of Azure, we're really bringing to the customers today a standard solution that enables a best practice that then can be replicated across many sites at scale. And I think the reason our customers prefer this particular use case is if you look at sort of what's behind digital performance management, it starts with the idea that there are certain bottlenecks or constraints. And every factory, whether it's running at 82% efficiency or 45% efficiency, there's typically a handful of bottlenecks or constraints that are holding that efficiency back. And if you can identify those constraints and then target improvements related to those, understand with data and analytics what is really the root cause of that constraint, and then problem solve those constraints with a priority-driven approach that results in measured outcome of additional production hours, that whole systematic approach is what our customers have seen to produce the most value. And then, of course, there are many challenges that our customers can address that don't even require our technology. But this idea of focusing on what are the prioritized opportunities to pursue, and then applying the technology to those areas really ensures that companies are getting the greatest return for the least investment because it's focused on the biggest priorities.
We indeed have a lot more to talk about actually in terms of PTC and Microsoft, as we also are working on digital engineering, the design and engineering workflows, and accelerating innovation cycles. You alluded to workforce transformation and how you bring the frontline worker along, remote assist, retraining, reskilling, all of that very, very important aspects. Howard, maybe those for another time. We have a lot more to share. As we wrap up today, any parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think that what I would say is that it comes back to focus on value. One of our customers in the industrial electronics space, I think, just did a superb job of getting their organization aligned on essentially 4 of those use cases that I just described, and they are seeing tremendous velocity. It's standard across the enterprise. It produces a lot of value. The entire organization is aligned behind that. So I think number one is identify really what are those high value use cases that can be standardized and then extended across the network. I think the second thing I would say is technology does matter. I mean, sometimes we fall into the trap, and I understand why, of saying it's not about the technology, it's only about the mindsets and the behaviors and other things. And that's true right up until the technology that you have doesn't scale, or it's got security issues, or it can't grow with the business. And then what you've done is actually lost years of transformation. So while I agree with that, technology does matter, and that's why I'm really proud of the work that we're doing with you folks, because from end to end in the network, from the edge to the cloud, and all the solutions and capabilities in between, I think it's hard to match the portfolio that PTC and Microsoft are assembling. And now that I just said it didn't matter, I'm going to come back and say it does matter again, because it actually, with the best technology, with the most scalable infrastructure, a lot of this, quite frankly, rests on the laurels of the leaders in the companies that we're supporting. And it's incumbent upon them to treat transformation as a burning platform, an imperative, and to make sure that they've got the right support and that they're enabling the right mindsets and behaviors and adjusting the management systems to grow with the transformational journey that they want to be on. Many times I've also seen, the best technology with the best vision, but without the right support, ends up back to where we started this conversation, which is scale purgatory.
Well, not with PTC and Microsoft, though, right? The reason why you and I can say technology doesn't matter because we got it covered. And so we want our customers to focus on what they do best, which is their business, and then we're their technology partner, and we'll make it work. And so thank you so much, Howard. I think we have a lot more to talk about. I think in the next decade we'll talk a lot about sustainability. I know with digital performance management, we'll enable sustainability-related use cases, whether those are carbon or water or energy-related. We'll talk more about workforce empowerment, closing the skills gap, reskilling existing workers. We'll talk about remotely operating everywhere, simulating everything, automating anywhere, and then bringing autonomous to light as far as manufacturing as well as supply chains as we'll be faced with an increasing challenge as relates to our workforce and the productivity and efficiency kind of opportunities ahead of us. Digital engineering, I alluded to, all of this is happening now. We're at the forefront of it, but how do we bring it to life at scale? That was how we started the conversation, and that's how we're going to wrap it up by moving from pilots and pilot purgatory to scale, so that we can see value realization at scale. So we can bring that. McKinsey will say that digital manufacturing opportunity globally at large is in the range of $50 trillion, and that's what we're after as an ecosystem. So it's an exciting time indeed. Howard, thank you so much for sharing some exceptional learnings and advices here today. We're proud to partner with PTC. I'm personally proud to partner with you and the PTC leadership, and I look forward to many, many more years of collaboration, innovation, and enablement. And with that, we'll wrap up today's session. Thank you.
And Çağlayan, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you and to be sharing this time with you and your audience. And with respect to our partnership with Microsoft, it is one of our two most strategic partnerships in manufacturing. The other, of course, being a joint partner that we have, Rockwell Automation. So appreciate it and look forward to doing many more great things together on behalf of all of the customers that might be listening to this session today. Thank you.